When you're creative for joy versus when you're creative to sustain a living, sometimes things change. The world is kind of spoken in the language of relationships, the relationship we have with ourselves, with other people. And so I found that I can apply what I'm most passionate about to almost anything. You develop this agency over your life. You get to build your life with so much more intention, and life starts to look a lot more the way you want it to because you are creating your life a lot more than you might think.
Yeah. On episode 364 of the podcast, you are going to gain insights into how mental health and emotional fitness can enhance creativity and productivity. You'll have a better understanding of the unique emotional challenges that are faced by creatives and entrepreneurs, and you'll learn how to address them. And then you'll also get practical tips and exercises for improving emotional well-being while pursuing creative passions. All that and more on this episode. What is up, my friend? Hey, it is Ryan Coral from Studios for Business, the Grow Your Video Business podcast. Super excited to be with you. I think we're getting really close to the holidays, so I've put on my, this is like one of my favorite jackets. It's kind of like a sweater, and I am cozy. So glad that you're here. This is the show where we talk about the business of video production. If you're a corporate or commercial filmmaker and you're trying to build a better business that's more profitable, that's more sustainable, one that's not driving you into the ground, stressing you out, hard to know when and where your next paycheck is coming from, then this is the show for you, because over the last 19 years, I've built a video production business. We've hit 7 figures multiple times, and it hasn't been all glitter and rainbows. There have been plenty of challenges along the way, and I love sharing those. I love sharing my mistakes. It's so fun, but I believe in the power of that, and I think it can be helpful for you. So I'm glad that you're here. And in the spirit of that, I have a workshop that I offer. It's a completely free workshop. It's called the 6-Figure Filmmaker Workshop. This is where I unpack my learnings from the last 19 years, and I share 3 of the biggest things that I've done inside of my business to help me get my life back and build something that has been sustainable. So you can get access to that workshop for free if you go to studiosherpas.com/workshop. It is my gift to you. So go check that workshop out and get ready for a very powerful episode today. Mind bending. Really, really good stuff. Glad you're here. Let's roll the tape and get into today's episode. What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to another episode of the show. Today with me is Dr. Emily Anhalt, who is a psychologist, an emotional fitness consultant, and co-founder and chief clinical officer of COA, your gym for mental health. Dr. Emily Anhalt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness. It's not every day that I get to have a doctor on the show. So this is pretty cool.
Wow. Well, that's my honor then.
That's good. What would you say is your favorite thing about the work that you get to do?
I'd say my favorite thing about my work is I learned at a young age that when you know a lot about psychology, you know a little about everything, because psychology is the study of relationships, and the world is kind of spoken in the language of relationships, the relationship we have with ourselves, with other people. And so I found that I can apply what I'm most passionate about to almost anything, which means every day looks different. Everything I do varies. And as a person with raging ADHD, it works out really well for me that nothing is ever the same for too long.
That's good. Raging. That's really good. So we're talking to, this tribe that we're hanging out with today. We're creatives, and there are a lot of overlapping struggles and mindset things, and things that we just share in common in the work that you do. If you've worked in, I'm assuming you've worked with creatives, yes?
Definitely.
Yeah. What's a common struggle or just something that you work on with people like me?
Something I feel like I've seen a lot of is when you're creative for joy versus when you're creative to sustain a living. sometimes things change in ways that aren't always ideal for the creative process. Some people do well with, creativity under pressure. Other people don't. And I think sometimes we forget that creativity needs space. And I've seen a lot of creatives pack their schedule and take on a ton of projects, and then there isn't room just to sit and think and let their mind kind of put things together and wander and imagine and all the things that I think are really important for the creative process. So I think just a reminder to create a bunch of space for yourself that doesn't maybe feel productive, but will lead to the kind of thinking and making that's hard to do otherwise.
Wow, I love that permission that you've just given people. I think a lot of people right now are thinking, I like this. Because I would be one to say, unfortunately, I'd be like, listen, you got work to do, so you better get to it. But even as you said that, I think about like my early days as a wedding filmmaker. I thrived in that work because there's a ton of pressure. You get one shot to get that shot. No redos. Like, you've got to get it and you got to figure it out. And I just loved it. And then I've run into so many people that are like, oh my gosh, I did one wedding, or I would never do a wedding because it's like too much stress. And I think people will fall into work like that. That's kind of like when you start doing video, that's an easy place to go because people find out you do video. Oh, my cousin's getting married. Like, could you film there? But people will stick with it because it's like, it's an easy way to make money. But it may not align with how they're wired, and they may not feel like there are other options. So to even consider, hey, if the kind of video that you're doing isn't bringing you joy, maybe, oh my goodness, there are so many kinds of videos, right? There's event video where you do got to get it, or there's other, there's brand stories where, or commercial stuff where you can shoot it 100 times until you get the shot that you need to get. And if that appeals more to how you're wired, geez, consider what you're actually making.
Yeah, I did all of my grad school research on learning and work styles. And a big conclusion of the research was the idea that people who adjust their environment to their learning and work needs instead of trying to adjust their learning and work style to their environment tend to be more successful. So, for example, as a person with ADHD, I'm not going to do well in a job that requires me to sit really still and quietly for 8 hours every day. I'm just not going to thrive in that environment. And granted, of course, it requires some privilege to be able to shape your job. Some people have to do whatever work will pay the bills. Sure. I definitely recognize that. But there are a lot of ways that you can tailor what you're doing to work for you instead of constantly trying to fit yourself into this box and this mold that was made by people who think differently than you do. So I totally agree. I think some self-awareness about how you do your best work, what you enjoy the most, what brings you purpose and meaning, and then figuring out how to shape a career around that instead of finding something and being like, okay, how can I conform to that, will lead to a lot more success.
Yeah. And, as a therapist, not me, but you, one of the things that you have the honor of seeing is people that have decided that it's time to take control of a part of their life where they just haven't invested in. When they hire somebody like you, they're realizing that something needs work on in my life. Maybe I know what it is, or maybe I don't. But the fact that you get to witness somebody taking that step to say, I need something. That's pretty cool.
I know. It really is one of my favorite things. People pay me to tell me their secrets, first of all, which is the most amazing thing I can think of in my life. Maybe that's my favorite thing about the work that I do. But also, just in general, I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And when you go to therapy and you start the process of self-inquiry and, asking yourself tough questions and leaning into discomfort, there are all kinds of things that come out of that you never could have asked for and that you never could have predicted. I think a lot of people walk around believing that life is happening to them. And what I've discovered in therapy is you start to learn, no, I'm happening to it. I am creating this life for myself in all kinds of ways I'm not even aware of. And the more self-aware I become, the more I learn about my unconscious motivations and the things that I'm trying to avoid without even realizing it, and the things I think I deserve and all of that. As you learn that, you develop this agency over your life. You get to build your life with so much more intention, and life starts to look a lot more the way you want it to, because you are creating your life a lot more than you might think.
Yeah. That's so good. I just had the first episode I did today, the first interview I did today. The woman said, she's like, write this down. She said, a lot of us either, there's one of two camps. They say, does life happen to you? And she said, or does life happen for you? And I just love that idea of like constructing that and thinking through, like, how do I think about like the things like in my day? Am I waking up and just kind of like, well, whatever happens. And so I was in Uganda. People listening to the show, they're going to get a lot of this over the next few weeks. One of the things that's interesting about the Ugandan culture is, or at least what I read, the people that I met, at least some of the people I met, I don't think live like this, but a lot of the Ugandan culture is they don't think about, life happens to them, right? They kind of like dwell in the past. And I'm like, man, like, how do I enter a culture like that where I believe everything the opposite of that? It's like, no, it's not happening to you. Like you can do something. Like you can. I'm like, is this gonna go? But and that's somebody wrote that. I don't know. I didn't meet the entire culture, so I don't really know. I think it's probably a stereotype, maybe somewhat true, but. Point being, I think that's really powerful to even think through in our own lives. What camp am I in? And could I see myself actually creating intentionality around my own life and thinking, you know what, I have something to say or something to think about this that I could influence the end result.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to do that if you've never really been taught how to do that, which is why I think therapy and just any kind of self-growth work is really powerful, because we sort of create these tracks through our life. I'll compare it a lot to, if you're going down a snowy mountain and your upbringing kind of takes you down a particular set of tracks every time, you start to feel really lodged in those tracks. It can start to feel really hard to go any other way. Yeah. And I think doing work on yourself is almost like throwing a fresh blanket of snow over all of that and figuring out, how do I actually want to get down this mountain? What would it look like to go a different way this time and to merge two different tracks so that I can try different things? And it's just a pursuit that feels so worth doing.
Well, can we just dive into maybe some proactive practices that people can, in one, maybe it's even starting, obviously, like meeting with a therapist or somebody that does, counseling, coaching, whatever. That's really helpful because you can like pull stuff out of them, right? You're going to ask me questions that I wouldn't even think of. So maybe first step, if I don't have somebody like you to help pull that stuff out, where can somebody start? And that's probably where you start anyway. So I'll just let you talk.
Sure. Well, let me tell you about the research that I did on this, because I think that gives an idea of how to start. So a number of years ago, I wanted to figure out, what does a more proactive approach to mental health and emotional health look like? Because when it comes to physical health, there's physical health and there's physical fitness. If you don't have a cold or a heart problem, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're physically fit. It just means you're not physically ill in that moment. Physical fitness means you exercise, you eat well, you sleep enough, you're working on your body such that you're going to prevent some of that physical illness down the line. And there wasn't really language around an emotional equivalent. Emotional health was really sort of, you're either mentally ill or you're mentally healthy. And I don't think that's true. I think there's also just such a thing as being mentally fit, being mentally strong, such that you're going to prevent some mental health struggles later. So I wanted to define what that actually looks like. Yeah. So I did a big research study about 10 years ago where I interviewed 100 psychologists and 100 entrepreneurs. And I asked them the question, how would you know if you were sitting across the table from an especially emotionally healthy person? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What do those people do? What do they not do? And out of this research came what I call the 7 traits of emotional fitness. These are the 7 things that emotionally healthy people are practicing all the time. And those 7 things are self-awareness, empathy, mindfulness, curiosity, playfulness, resilience, and communication. And so I took these 7 things and thought, all right, so how do you work on these things. What is an emotional push-up? What does that look like? How do you do them every day in these 7 categories? And I started to build out workshops and talks and things for each of these 7 traits. And around this time, I met my now amazing co-founder, Alexa, and we decided to turn this into a gym for mental health. Like, come work on your mental health alongside other people who care about it in the same way. Nothing has to be wrong with you. You don't have to be broken. This is about building strength. Yeah. And so I think really the first step is just to decide that this is important to you and that you want to devote time to it. Similar to how physical fitness isn't going to just happen to you. You have to say, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat a little better. I'm going to make sure that I'm sleeping. Similarly, for emotional fitness, you have to decide, I'm willing to be a little bit uncomfortable so that I can get stronger. I'm going to do my emotional push-ups. And from there, you can really start in any of these 7 traits because they all really influence each other, and you will naturally improve all of them as you improve any of them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a really cool discovery. Really even interesting to, like, you know, I've never really thought through, like, well, what is an emotionally healthy person? What would I kind of judge in these 7? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good, pretty exhaustive list. And not that I could have come up with that, but I agree. So what might be some practices that that we could apply or do?
Sure. So I could maybe, if you wanted to right now, we could practice an emotional push-up together if you felt like doing that.
Well, this is uncomfortable, but sure, let's do it.
Well, it's meant to be a little uncomfortable, right? Like if you think about what a physical push-up is, it's this small physical exertion that puts you a little out of your comfort zone so that you can get stronger. And if you just do one, you're not really going to get stronger. But if you do some every day, you will not only get better at push-ups, you'll be able to carry your groceries and pick up your kids. You're less likely to get sick later because your body can fight off disease better. And so it has to be a little uncomfortable or you're probably not getting stronger. So similarly, an emotional push-up is anything that puts you a little outside of your emotional comfort zone so that you can grow. And what's a little out of one person's comfort zone might be way out of another's. So you kind of have to figure out, what should your personal workout routine look like? But some examples of things I've seen are good emotional push-ups are, you know, if you're someone who says yes to everything that's asked of you and then you end up feeling overwhelmed and resentful, then for you an emotional push-up might be saying one kind but firm no today. Whereas if you tend to focus more on yourself, then maybe an emotional push-up is to offer to help someone else with something today. Other emotional push-ups are apologizing for a mistake, or meditating for 5 minutes, or pausing before you pour yourself a drink to ask what you might be trying not to feel, or putting your phone away after 10 p.m. and sitting there feeling a little bit bored instead of giving yourself that constant dopamine hit. So for our push-up today, what I would challenge us to do is something that I think is powerful for all people in all kinds of settings, which is asking for feedback. I think we're not always so good at asking for feedback. So what I'd recommend that anyone listening do right now is pull out your phone and pull up a text message and direct it toward someone whose opinion you respect. It could be a colleague, a spouse, a friend, your kid, anyone in your life whose feedback you value, and send a message in your own words that's something like, hey, I'm working on my emotional fitness today, and today's workout is to check in with someone whose feedback I value. So would you be willing to share what is one thing I'm doing well as a friend or colleague or boss, and what's one thing that I could do 10% better? And I like to say 10% better because if you just say, what could I do better? People don't always know what you're really asking for. But 10% better is just like, what's something I could just maybe improve a little bit? And if you send this text message, and I try to send a message like this to a different person in my life about once a week, I promise you will get information back that will help your self-awareness. You know, the text message is practicing communication, it's curiosity, or asking questions. And, you know, it hits on so many of these traits that I think it's a nice push-up to start with.
That's great. Well, I have a question for you. I am working on my emotional health, and if you would give me some feedback, I respect you. I mean, you're a doctor. I mean, like, just come on. Like, would you give me some honest feedback?
Well, it depends. Hit me with it. Let's see where we're at.
Depends. Well, I got thick skin, so if it's really bad, I'm just gonna like let it bounce off of me. But just kidding. So. I would love to know from the time that we got on to this episode, pre-record, what do you think maybe I did well? And then from the time that we started to like right now. What do you think that's something I could work on to just make myself 10% better as a podcast interviewer?
I love this. I love that instead of sending this message, you're asking me. Live push-up. I'm so here for it. All right. So let me think. I would say something that I feel you do well is that it seems like you really love your job. And it's so fun to do something with someone who really loves what they're doing. Seems like you were psyched to have this conversation before I even got on here. You already had a couple great conversations today. Just feels like it sets me up for success because it seems like you're going to have fun no matter what. So I'm ready to have fun with you. And I think especially with a conversation with someone you don't know that well, the attitude they show up with really sets the tone. So I appreciated that about you from second one. So thank you for that. In terms of 10% better, I guess maybe... I don't need this so much because I really love a good off-the-cuff conversation, but I can imagine there'd be some people who come on here who would have loved to get a sense of what the conversation was really going to be about in advance, what kind of questions you might ask, that kind of thing. So I could imagine that perhaps being something, but I'm here for the as-we-go vibe.
I love that. Yeah, even saying that, I've had multiple... I'm launching a new show with an audience that I have no relationships with or very, very little. This show, so many of the people we asked to be on the show, a lot of people either know me or know of me just because I've been doing this work for so long. And so there's very little like questions, like what are we going to talk about?
Right.
But this new show, oh my gosh, like almost every person has said like, hey, can you send me a list of questions? Like things are, and I'm always like, oh, no, it's like super conversational. Like, and I'm like, oh, I just need to tell people that on the front end that this is the expectation is like, you just show up. We're going to have coffee. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Like, what do you love about what you do? And, what's success story, whatever the thing might be. But that's really helpful feedback that I should implement into this brand and not assume that people, I obviously knew that we didn't know each other before this one, so that's good.
Well, some people think as they speak, and some people need to think and then speak. Yeah. I'm definitely a think as I speak person, but I have people in my life who are so brilliant and thoughtful, but if you ask them to answer something immediately, they're just not going to give you their best self because they need a couple minutes to process it first. So I guess it sort of depends what kind of guests you're working with.
Yeah. Well, in show format too, not to like go down a rabbit hole. In my mind, at least this new show that I'm launching, it's really about their story. So there's no trick questions. I'm not going to stump you, right? I'm going to ask you, hey, so why did you get into this work? And what do you love about it? And like, tell me a story about like one of your favorite success, like, clients that you've worked with. And you like, it might take you a couple of seconds to think through because you got to pick. But outside of that, it's just like, it's like we are having coffee and, if I stump you, we're going to just edit that out because, just because we can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yay. Well, that was fun. Thank you. That's a good and helpful exercise. And I was actually getting a little bit nervous. I'm like, oh man, I'm certain that I probably did something or said something that she's going to be like, next time just don't. But
I appreciate you breaking an emotional sweat and flexing your feels.
It's like I just did 100 push-ups. Yeah. That's excellent. What would you say? Is there another like practical? Like I really like that. That is very easy. I think I shouldn't say very easy. That's a great place for people to start. You got like one more that we could consider in our exercise routine.
Sure. So one of the traits is playfulness. And I think play is really undervalued and somewhat misunderstood, especially when it applies to our work lives. When I ask people, when's the last time you played? People usually tell me about a board game or a sports game or a video game. And those are great kinds of play. But I really love the improv definition of play, which is that when someone comes to you with an idea, you say yes and to that idea. You build on the idea and together you get somewhere that neither of you could have gotten alone. And so brainstorming is a type of play, or taking a joke way too far with a friend, that's a type of play. So I really encourage people to integrate play into their life more. I actually read a study in grad school that showed that people who play regularly live longer by a significant number of years than people who don't play regularly. That's how important it is to our development and our longevity. So I try to start meetings or even just hangouts with people with an icebreaker question or a game of some kind. So maybe I'll put it to you. Would you rather me ask you an icebreaker question or would you rather try to play a game?
Oh man, I want to do both.
Okay.
Playfulness, I think that's probably like a pretty high one. But let's start with the icebreaker question and see where we go.
Okay. And so would you rather have a fun, silly icebreaker question or like a deep, emotional icebreaker question?
Hit me with your favorite.
Okay. Let's go with the deep one, because the one I've been asking lately that I'm into is, who is one person who changed your life but doesn't know it?
Oh, goodness. Wow. This got deep real fast, and I'm trying not to get like too emotional. I think I have cried on this show. I am a crier. I'm just going to put that out there. People that listen to the show like already know this, but even thinking about this, I'm like, oh man. And of course, like we're in therapy right now, so I'm going to talk about my dad. It's obvious. It's just that easy. But he passed like almost 21 years ago. You are not allowed to make me cry when I don't even know you. Yeah, I would say that's a pretty easy answer. Yeah, I would think that like I didn't have a good relationship with my dad growing up, and it's interesting. The older I get, the wiser I feel like I'm I'm becoming, and the more I've reflected on my relationship with him and what he did for me, what he didn't do for me, and the things that I had expectations and hopes for and was disappointed. I've learned today, like, oh my gosh, like I think he actually did the best that he could.
Yeah.
And so, my expectations, I think, were up here, but that was not fair or okay for me to have those. And so I think, that would be one where I feel like I did learn things from him, and I think he would be surprised. Actually, I think when I told him something like shortly after graduating college, I said something to him, and the joke, it wasn't really a joke, but he would always say things like, as a teenager, I always thought I was smarter than him, right? Which I think that's what a lot of parents experience, where their kids are just stubborn and think that they know better than their parents do. And I said this one thing, sort of just saying like, man, I learned this thing I finally understand what you were trying to teach me out growing up about this. He's like, you finally get it. And that I actually did know what I was talking about. But there have been more things like that, as I've gotten older and I've realized like, wow, he was not, he was far from perfect. But yeah, I would say that he impacted my life and changed it. And I'm learning things even today about myself that I think he helped pave the way for.
Thank you for sharing that. I definitely understand how complicated the relationship to our parents can be. That's what I've based a lot of my life on. So,
what's like a favorite story, a favorite client that's like something that you helped somebody work through, that you look back and you're like, wow, that was a lot of work, but that person did it, and that's pretty amazing.
Well, maybe rather than calling out an individual person, I'll talk about a theme I see a lot, which is, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of founders, people starting companies, people trying to do really big, intense things in the world. And one of the things I try to make sure people know when I start working with them is my goal is not actually to make sure your business is as successful as possible. My goal is to make sure that you're living an authentic life that you're excited about. Because whatever happens to your company, you're going to spend a chunk of your life working on it. So if you don't feel good about that, then it's probably worth changing your mind about what you're doing. Yeah. And so it's really interesting to see people who have this thing to prove, who've pinned so much of their identity and so much of their worth and value on something happening with the company in a particular way. Right. And watching them over time start to think that there might be other ways that they can measure their value on earth than the time that they're spending. And what I've seen is that some people end up realizing they don't actually want to start a company. They want to do something else with their time, and they maybe just never had the permission to do something that's not as large scale or that's not as grandiose. And I think a person realizing that however they show up in the world makes them intrinsically worthy of love and support. The process of coming to terms with that is such a beautiful thing to get to support and witness. So that makes me happy every time.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah. I have had so many conversations where, people, a lot of times they get into this work, not because it's going to make them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. But because they feel this, they feel compelled to tell beautiful stories or to capture beautiful imagery. And as it turns into a thing that has to sustain us, it can become a thing that we just build an unhealthy relationship with, which in turn makes our marriages suffer or our friendships suffer. And we sacrifice all of those things because of the value that we've received in the work, or because of the pressure that we just put on ourselves. And to even think that it doesn't necessarily have to be like that,
Yeah.
that's pretty powerful too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we don't always have to monetize our joy. Like everything that brings us joy does not need to be co-opted to make money for us. Sometimes we can do a thing just because we love doing it.
Yes. Unfortunately, the way that my brain works is I'm always like, a friend will tell me about something and I'll just be like, oh man, if you turn that into a YouTube channel,
Yeah,
how many?
I'm that way too. I'm like, oh, if you just did this, you could, you could leverage this into that, and you could, I do that too, and I've had to catch myself of like, not everyone necessarily wants that. Some people,
Right.
that'll take the fun out of it for them.
Yep. I have a friend, a really close friend of mine who he's very OCD, self-proclaimed. I don't know if he's actually been diagnosed, but loves like his lawn to be perfect, loves the trees to be in the bushes, everything to be just pristine. And he's been driving past this like abandoned school for the longest time, and it's all overgrown. And one day he said, he loaded up his little lawnmower, grabbed some of his other tools, and just like went to this property and like cleaned it all up. He filmed it, put it on YouTube. It got over 150,000 views.
Nice.
And he's like, oh my gosh. And he loved doing it. He did get terrible poison ivy on his arms. He couldn't sleep for like almost a week.
Yeah.
And then he said, I'm going to do this again. So he found another property. He did it for that property. Then he found this homeowner. He knocked on their door. He said, hey, can I see that you're, and they had some disability. They couldn't keep up with it. And they're like, oh my gosh, for sure. So he is making, today, he's actually monetized it. He's making thousands of dollars a month doing something that is bringing him joy. So he's got the best of both worlds. He's like helping somebody. He's doing something that's like, he feels this release of whatever, endorphins or whatever, as he's like making something that looks terrible, make it look beautiful. And he's making money. And then he's also blessing all of these people that love watching these 45-minute videos of him transforming these lawns. They're saying the nicest things that a human could say to another person, like, oh man, you love that person so much. I saw you like zip tie that fence so that it would be, that's what you would do on your property. You did that for them. Like you're doing way more than just lawn. It is like one of the coolest things to watch unfold. And I, at the very beginning, almost said like, dude, like you could actually like turn this in. And fortunately, organically, it just kind of happened.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it was pretty fun.
Love that.
Yeah. Props, Sean. Keep up the good work, man. Also annoyed at him because his YouTube channel has way more subscribers than mine does. He's been doing it for like a month and a half. And I've only been at it for like, I don't know, like years and years and years. So like whatever.
Fair.
I'm not bitter. Can you help me work through that? Just kidding. Not kidding. All right. So you've given us some very practical exercises. What question am I not asking you as we kind of get close to the end here that you think might be helpful for our creators, or really for me? I mean, you saw me bawling earlier, so how can you help me?
I think something probably people know on some level that is really important, I believe, in the creative community is finding your community, finding your people, making sure you're not trying to create in a vacuum, because creativity begets creativity. And I think being around other people who are doing amazing things can be so inspiring and energizing and motivating. So whether it's joining some kind of group where you meet regularly and talk about what you're doing, or collaborate with other creatives on things that they're making, or share your work out and be generous and thoughtful about commenting and supporting other people's work, buying people's art at full price, even though they're offering you a discount because they're your friends and family, all of this to build community and to give support, to ask for support when we need it, I think is a hugely important factor in the creative process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm glad that you said that, because really from the beginning, that has been my heartbeat. I remember, I think it was year 2. It might have been my first year when I stumbled into wedding film in the Detroit area here. I found there was this group. They were the Michigan Independent Videographer Association, and most of the people filmed weddings. A lot of people did, other corporate events, and I learned so much from this group. They helped me so much. I mean, oh my goodness. I would have had to figure out so many more things if I was on my own. And I think I've taken that for granted for a long time. Although, as I was plugged into that group, eventually I was like, man, I would love to spend more time building something like this for other people that aren't just in the Detroit area, but, maybe they could be around the world. So for me, I highly value, I've benefited so much from being a part of a community and collaborating versus, thinking through like, well, this is all my competition. I'm equipping them with, strategies for how they can run bigger, better businesses, be more profitable, maybe win some of my clients. What is wrong with me? But I just care about that. I think that's community is so much more important to me. And I think when people experience genuine community, they don't feel alone anymore. They feel empowered. There's just so much good that comes out of that. Thank you for bringing that one up, because I concur.
Good. Yeah, I think having an abundance mentality goes really far. It's, success is not a pie that has a limited number of slices to go around. Yeah. There's an, unlimited amount for everyone. And I think the more we support other people, the more we get lifted up with them.
That's really good. My wife is an abstract painter, and I'm definitely going to tell her about your... I'm going to tell her so that we can keep telling our friends, like, hey, don't ask Andrea for a discount. Like, just pay what she's asking for these pieces.
I think so, if you can.
Yeah, that's good. Emily, this has been so good.
Likewise.
No, really, like, a little annoyed that you made me cry, but I should have known when you said,
crying's good for the soul, I think we need to do it regularly.
So good. But seriously, on a podcast with a stranger, like, are you serious?
It's a great place for it.
That's a good place. How can people follow along with your work and maybe keep in touch with you?
Yes, please do connect on social media, on all the socials. My handle is Dr. Emily Anhalt, DrEmilyanhalt. You can find my website at dremilyanhalt.com, and check out COA, the Gym for Mental Health, at joincoa.com. It's a great way to work on your mental health in a proactive way. I hope to be in touch and keep flexing those feels and breaking an emotional sweat.
That's so good. Yeah. Well, I'll include all those links in the show notes. So good. How do you want to leave us today?
I think just with gratitude and excitement that this concept is really taking off, that people are prioritizing this in their lives. And maybe I'll end with something we call the resting heart rate, which is one word to describe how you're feeling right now. So I would be curious, Ryan, what's one word to describe how you're feeling?
Energized.
Nice. That's the one I was going to say, but I think I'll stick with gratitude.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yes, I would say that. I do feel that one as well. This is so good. Man, I'm so glad that Tina made this happen. You definitely have a gift, and I'm excited for how you are using that in the world.
Thank you.
I know a lot of people are benefiting from it. So thank you for, I'm teasing when I say, like, you made me cry. I think that was really good. I'm glad. And I wouldn't have let it happen had I known.
No worries.
I would have let it happen either way. Yeah, all those things. But appreciate you, and thank you for making time for the Studio Sherpas community. And I'm leaving this conversation very energized.
I'm so glad. Thank you so
grateful.
much for having me, and take good care.
Hey, thank you for hanging out with me on this episode. If you want the show notes, links to the things that we talked about, go to studiosherpas.com/362 or whatever app you're in. I think you might have access to those. Let me know what you liked. Was this episode enjoyable? If you're watching the video of this, leave a comment and let me know what your big takeaway was, or shoot me an email. My email address is ryan@studiosherpas.com. Don't forget about the 6-figure filmmaker workshop that you can access by going to studiosherpas.com/workshop. Again, it's 60 minutes, jam-packed with lots of actionable items. I promise it will be good. And if not, then give you your money back. Oh wait, it's free. So go check it out. Thank you for being here. I'll see you on next week's episode. And until then, keep climbing. I'm with you, my friend. You are not alone in this work. I am for the success of your business, and cheers to you. So I said that because I hit my glass. I don't know if you can hear it. Let's do it one more time. Cheers to you. Talk to you soon. See you next week. Bye for now.